Hey everyone, this is Pastor Wes. Hope your week is going well, enjoying the beautiful weather we've been having. We're going to pick back up in our study of Joshua and talk about recognizing God in the midst of the battle. And last week when we began this, we were looking at Joshua chapter 5, beginning in verse 13, and it says this: "And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? Are you for us or are you against us?" And when we finished last week, we were talking about how Joshua is not a passive person. He is not a reserved person. He doesn't procrastinate. He's aggressive. He is a warrior. He's a fighter. He's tenacious. He is relentless. And oddly enough, the very thing that makes him a great leader is the thing that almost kills him. And isn't it amazing how your greatest strength in the wrong place can become your greatest weakness? Your greatest strength at the wrong time can become your greatest weakness. Joshua, what we know about him, he didn't have any trouble taking on issues. He didn't have any problem with responsibility or taking authority. Joshua was aggressive. And so perhaps we see that he is selected to be the successor to Moses because, as we know, Moses had a little bit of a tendency to lead people in circles. It's well documented in the Bible that an entire generation of people followed Moses around and around and around, doing the same stuff over and over again in circles, because when Moses was faced with an opportunity to go forward, he becomes frustrated and he begins to lead people out of his own human frustration and events. And he gets angry and God removes him from leadership because Moses is a leader that cannot control his own temper. You cannot lead into greatness with small-mindedness. You cannot go forward wearing your feelings on your sleeve. You've got to be able to control your emotions. And as Christians trying to overcome and be successful in this world today, I tell people all the time, you've got to have rhinoceros skin. You can't be offended. You can't wear your emotions on your sleeve. You've got to have thick skin, tough skin, and you cannot let your emotions drive you. And the fact of the matter is, we all have emotions. But what separates a leader or a great leader from everybody else is the ability to control your emotions. That's how you become an effective leader. People say, well, I don't have any problems with anger. I don't get frustrated. Yeah, but a lot of times we have to pull you out of the ditch of despair. We have to pull you out of sadness. We have to pull you out of the place where you've almost hit depression. And so just because you don't fight anger doesn't mean you don't have another emotion that you wear on your sleeve. And so we have to be careful on how we condemn, and we shouldn't condemn others for their emotions. We should be in check of our own emotions. But Moses, instead of telling people what thus saith the Lord, he said this is what Moses had to say, all right? And God had to get him out of the way because he was misrepresenting God. And God is very concerned about people who abuse authority. And I know people look around the world today and they say, how in the world could God allow all this to go on? The corruption, the abuse of authority in government all over the world and locally. But I'm going to tell you, God is concerned about those who abuse authority. He is. Whether that's in government or corporate leadership or church leadership or even domestic leadership within the house, God is very concerned. And he warns men about being abusive to their wives. In fact, he says that he won't hear their prayers if they abuse authority. Thankfully, God doesn't just mentor followers, but he also mentors leaders. And he helps you to develop your skill so that you can be more adept at what God desires to do in your life. And I want you to get this. Please get this. If God is training you up to be a leader, then God is going to train you through trouble. If God is training you to be a leader, then God is training you through trouble to get there. And if you're one of those people that wants to hide under a rock every time trouble hits, you're probably not going to make a good leader. Now, God can train you through that. I didn't say you'll never be a leader. I just said at that point, you're not going to be a good leader until you learn to face adversity, until you learn to trust God to get you through the trials of life. That's how he trains us. He trains us through trouble. He trains us by exposing us. God is very good at exposure. He exposes us to various degrees of trials and pain and suffering and frustrating situations, and then He critiques on how we handle the trouble. He critiques us on how we handle the issue. There are a lot of people out there that like to critique, but they're not doing it for the right reason. Listen, what we know about Joshua is Joshua, he had the war thing down pat. And in this study, we'll go back and we'll take a look at his background so that we really understand that he has the war thing down pat. Some of you, y'all are like Joshua. Y'all have the war thing down pat. I mean, I don't have to motivate you to speak your mind. You didn't even have to get saved to learn how to speak your mind. You don't need any sermons from me on how to be aggressive and how to tell people what you think. You'll do it in a flash. You'll fight in a minute, and then you'll find out what the war was about later. I know a ton of people, some of you are so aggressive, you'll slap somebody and then say, "What did you say?" Joshua was like that. Joshua would fight at the drop of a hat. And if we're honest, as you're listening to this, be honest. How many of you really have a tendency to go to war? How many of you have a tendency to go to war? That is just your gut reaction when something happens. You're ready to go to war over it. And people say, everybody says, "Oh no, not me. I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm level-headed," until somebody says something about your kid. Somebody does something to your kid. All of a sudden, you're jumping up in the middle. You're ready to go to war, and you don't even know what's going on. Your kid may very well be in the wrong, but you're ready to go to war. You'll go to war in a flash. And it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing. It's in you. And God can use that. So you don't want to kill that. You want to learn to control that. And what you want to make sure of is that you find a place that is appropriate where your skill set and your strength can be utilized effectively. Joshua is getting ready to take on the battle of his life, and he's got the stress, he's got the heaviness, he's got the weariness of prolonged battle, and he's been in a series of battles. And you've got to understand that when you go from battle to battle to battle, and a lot of us live like that, you go from battle to battle to battle, you're ready to fight. You're just prone to fight because that's all you know, that's all you've been facing, and you say, just here we go again. Well, the problem with Joshua is that he looks up, and remember, he's gone through battle after battle after battle, and he looks up and there's a man standing. And his gut reaction is to go to war. He jumps up and he says, "Are you with me? Are you against me?" Now, the problem with that is this. First of all, Joshua didn't have a man standing over him. Joshua had God standing over him. And we become very good at times and becoming so practical that we don't even recognize God in the midst of the battle. We don't recognize God in the midst of the situation. And to not be able to discern God as part of the process is a crippling mistake that Joshua is about to make here, because he thinks he's just running into a man and he's running into God. So I'm going to leave you with this question tonight. Have you recognized God in your situation? Have you recognized God in the midst of your battle, in the midst of whatever it is that you're facing and going through right now? Have you recognized God in the middle of it? Until next time, I love you. God bless you. We'll see you next week.